From stone to steel, the evolution of architectural form. Hello everyone. Welcome back. Today, we are going to take a high-altitude flight through architectural history. As modern designers, it is incredibly easy to get caught up in current software, parametric algorithms, and contemporary materials. But to understand where we are going, we absolutely must master the foundations of where we have been. If you look at our roadmap for today, adapted right from our lecture overview, we will be tracing a direct lineage. We'll move from the monumental weights of ancient civilizations through the structural triumphs of the classical and medieval worlds, up to the humanism of the Renaissance, and finally, to the glass and steel honesty of the modern era. Let's dive in. Ancient civilizations and Egyptian architecture. We begin with the dawn of permanent construction. Ancient civilizations. Early architecture was a direct response to two things: survival and cosmic belief. When humanity transitioned from nomadic lifestyles to settled communities, the built environment became an expression of power and permanence. This brings us immediately to Egyptian architecture. When you think of Egypt, you think of mass. The Egyptians mastered the architecture of the afterlife. Because their structures were built for eternity, they relied heavily on the post and beam or post and lintel system, utilizing massive limestone and granite blocks. Think of Karnak or the pyramids of Giza. Space wasn't defined by open, airy interiors. It was defined by solid, unyielding mass. The focus was on monumental scale, symmetry, and axial alignments that mirrored the path of the sun. As a student of architecture, look at Egypt to understand how pure geometry and sheer weight can command psychological awe. Act 2. Classical perfection. Greek and Roman architecture. Next, we move to the Mediterranean to look at Greek and Roman architecture. This is where structural engineering meets philosophy. The Greeks took the post and lintel system they inherited from older civilizations and perfected its proportions. They introduced the classical orders, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, treating buildings almost like human sculptures. They understood visual perception so well that they used entases, subtle curves in their columns, to correct optical illusions, ensuring the buildings looked flawlessly straight to the human eye. But then came the Romans, the ultimate disruptors of the ancient world. The Romans looked at the limitations of the Greek beam, which could only span short distances before cracking under tension, and they mastered the arch. By mastering the true arch, the vault, and the dome, and by inventing a revolutionary form of concrete, the Romans did something miraculous. They enclosed massive interior spaces without requiring a forest of columns. The Pantheon is the ultimate testament to this. The Greeks mastered form, the Romans mastered space. Reaching for the heavens, Gothic architecture. As we move into the medieval period, we encounter Gothic architecture, which completely flipped the script on Roman mass. If Rome was about heavy, thick walls holding up domes, Gothic design was an engineering miracle of scale-to efficiency. The master builders of the Gothic era wanted two things: height and light. To achieve this without the walls collapsing outward, they invented a brilliant trio of structural elements: the pointed arch, the ribbed vault, and the flying buttress. The flying buttress acts like an external skeleton, catching the outward thrust of the roof and channeling it safely down to the ground. Because the walls no longer had to be thick load-bearing masses, architects could dissolve them entirely, replacing stone with magnificent stained glass windows. Gothic architecture taught the world that structure could be expressive, delicate, and profoundly ethereal. The rebirth of order, Renaissance architecture. By the 15th century, culture shifted away from the scholasticism of the Middle Ages, giving rise to Renaissance architecture. Architects like Brunelleschi and Alberti looked back at the chaotic complexity of the Gothic style and said, "No, let's return to clarity." The Renaissance was a rebirth of classical Greek and Roman ideals, but viewed through the lens of humanism and mathematics. It was defined by symmetry, proportion, and geometry. Architects looked to the human body as the ultimate blueprint of divine proportion. Instead of the vertical, infinite striving of the Gothic cathedral, Renaissance buildings, like the palaces of Florence or St. Peter's Basilica, offered a harmonious, easily readable balance. Columns, pilasters, and hemispherical domes returned, emphasizing order, reason, and human-centric scale. The Industrial Revolution changed everything. Suddenly, architects weren't limited to stone, brick, or timber. We gained mass-produced steel, plate glass, and reinforced concrete. Architects like Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, and Frank Lloyd Wright realized that copying historical styles no longer made sense. They stripped away ornament entirely. The mantra became form follows function. With steel frames, the exterior wall was no longer load-bearing. It became a light, curtain wall of glass. Space became open, fluid, and democratic. As we wrap up today, I want you to see the thread connecting all of these. From the heavy stone blocks of Egypt to the weightless glass towers of the modern era, architecture has always been a conversation between material capacity, structural innovation, and human culture.